Okay, hi everybody. During the last session, we talked about how assessment needs to be dynamic, given that behavior is context sensitive. I'd like to make one more point beginning in today's session, and that is I want to talk about assessment being relationship-based. So let's progress here. And to preface my emphasis on relationship-based assessment, I would like to ask you a brief question, and that is, what is the primary function of language? That is, what is the primary reason we speak? And to ground that perhaps in the most basic context, let's think about the child who, the little baby, the 1-year-old, let's say, who's just beginning to speak. What motivates, what underlies what is the fundamental reason that when babies begin speaking, why do they begin speaking? What's the point of speaking? What is the most fundamental function of language? That's the question, and I'm asking you that. What do you think? When we meet for our synchronous face-to-face session, we'll discuss that point. But let's see what the next slide has to tell us about the fundamental reason that individuals speak. And the bottom line reason, according to Lois Bloom in her intentionality model of speech and language, has something to do with the process that Bloom calls intersubjectivity. And according to Bloom, the most fundamental reason for speaking is to express to others intentionality and content of mind. Now, what is intentionality about? Again, it's about what's on one's mind and what one is trying to accomplish when one speaks. And what is content of mind? Well, that's consciousness. That's awareness. That's something, that's intentionality. And the only way that anybody could know what's on one or another's mind, another person's mind, is to somehow have that person express that thought or feeling, because otherwise we can't open the head up, look in, and say, aha, there's a cookie the individual wants, or there's an idea this individual wants to express about a fish, let's say. No, we can't. The individual has to come up with a way to express, to make public what's on their mind. And what better way to do that? And that is through speaking. And again, what is intentionality? What is content of mind? Well, the goals, intentionality, content of mind, the goals one has in speaking, what one is trying to accomplish, the focus of awareness, and in the area of language, consciousness or awareness is critical. If you're not aware of something, you're really not going to be speaking about it. Think about that. Your content of mind, content of language is things that we're aware of. Not aware, not going to be speaking about it. And very importantly, not only cognitive or conscious awareness, cognition, but affect. Language, intentionality and content of mind concerns affect. That is how one feels about something. So when one speaks, one is expressing what's on one's mind, one's intentionality, one's awareness, and one's feeling or feeling state. And that is part of the process of intersubjectivity. Intersubjectivity is about expressing, notice the first line there, to others, socially, what's on one's mind. And that social component of, I myself had children very late in life. My kids are now 13 and 14. They're going to be 14 and 15 shortly. And prior to that, having my kids, prior to myself being a father, I taught courses like this, but I was never as grounded until I had my children, never as grounded into how important social connections, connections with others are. I myself tend not to be the most social human being in the world, and but we're all very social, even if we consider ourselves more or less social. We like to be alone sometimes or not. Still, we're very in need of expressing to others. And children, well, they don't survive unless they're connected to others. So that social component of language and expressing what's on one's mind is absolutely critical. But the other part of intersubjectivity that's extremely important involves expecting others to acknowledge our intentionality and content of mind. When the child speaks, the child doesn't only express what's on their mind, but they're looking to the other for feedback that they've been heard, that the individual, the other, typically the caregiver, mom, dad, later on, friends and extended family, siblings, etc., have, finally teachers, have heard and understand what's on that child's mind. Maybe not having to agree, although kids very, very, very much are egocentric and want what they want and want us to pay attention. But as long as they're acknowledged, intersubjectivity has been accomplished. That is acknowledged by their listener. Now, with us adults, both the speaker and the listener are in charge of both expressing intentionality and acknowledging the others, because we're adults. In the case of very young children, the need to express what's on one's mind, that is the speaker's job, so to speak, or the speaker's drive. But with very young children, it's really the adults, caregivers, the adult other part of the dyad, component of the dyad, whose responsibility is to acknowledge what the child expresses. Well, from this point of view, that the fundamental function of language, the most basic function of language, is expressing what's on one's mind. And it's part of a process where one expects the other, the listener, to acknowledge that content of mind or intentionality. Well, that leads to the following implication. Assessment must be relationship-based. If you're going to really understand and get a good picture of what the individual is that you're assessing is capable of, the potential for expression, and issues that may be difficulties or problems that may be involved in communication, then assessment must be relationship-based. That is, you, the clinician, you yourself, must pay attention to your client's intent, the intent that they're expressing when they speak, their reasons for speaking, what they're focused on, how they're feeling, and give them signals. Respond to that content of mind. their intentionality. And thus, and only by doing that will you get a full picture of their communication, um, uh, speech and language competence, which is what we're assessing. So assessment must be relationship-based. Now, what is relationship-based assessment? Well, Elaine Geller and Gil Foley have written extensively on this topic, both in terms of from a clinician's point of view and from the point of view of supervision, actually. What is relationship-based assessment? Well, it requires a connection or bond between the speech-language specialist, the client, and the client's caregiver. If you're working with children, then the caregiver will be the parent. If you're working with adults, if you're assessing adults, well then the adult will be involved with a significant other, wife, partner, husband, whomever, and there needs to be one has to establish a connection or a bond. And what establishes intersubjectivity are two people coming together and sharing the inner life of the other. The inner life, that is really what the other person is attempting to accomplish, what the other person is feeling, and their point of view. Each trying to understand the other's point of view, the other's feeling states, the other's ideas about events that are occurring. Relationship-based assessment supports a sense of confidence between the client and the caregiver and the clinician. This is video. This slide focuses on children. This course on assessment also deals with adults, and that same sense of confidence has to be established between the clinician and the adult client and the adult client's significant other. And there's a fourth point that needs to be made when we consider relationship-based assessment. That point has to do with the term you see in bold there on the bottom, competence. We have this interesting interest, each of us, and that is, and desire actually, drive. We want others to see us as competent, as able. And we ourselves want to see our own selves. We want to perceive our own selves as competent. So we need to, and if we're in a situation that supports a sense of competence, a feeling of self-worth and ability, etc., competence, we're most open to communication. On the other hand, if we have a sense of, if we're getting signals from the other that we're not competent, that we're incompetent, that we've got problems, that we're just not as good as others, that we need some kind of support to some kind of addition to be competent, we're not going to be open to communication. In fact, we're going to be doing things to do, there's a term called face. We're going to need to save face. We try to maintain face. I put a citation here about competence, incompetence by Kowarski and Maxwell. There's a book about this competence expression, this natural process that we have of both trying to project competence to others and looking for feedback about being competent and needing help when the feedback suggests non-competence. That non-competence sense, well, that gives us a feeling of, the worst feeling in the world actually is shame. If we're really being viewed as weird by somebody else or incompetent, we may feel shame. And shame is a bad feeling, and it really leads to the individual closing down and protecting self. Thus, others often try to help us save face when they perceive that we're having a sense of, we're receiving a sense of non-competence. An experience that I think about that comes to mind that you may have had, that gave you a sense of questionable competence that I've certainly experienced, certainly as a younger person in particular, was involved being with several friends or individuals who I wanted to pay attention to me, and I wanted to make an impression on, and I wanted to like me, and I wanted them to respect me. And did you ever have the experience of being the third woman out or the third man out? Say you're with two other friends and you're the third party, and the two friends are conversing with one another, and they're directing their eye gaze and their conversation to one another, and you're kind of hanging out on the side, and occasionally maybe they look over to you, but clearly the connection is between those two, not you. How do you feel? That is not a comfortable feeling, particularly if you want to be part of the group. And that signals, you're getting the signal from that interaction, aren't you, that you are not being seen as being as desirable as the other. Well, that's not a comfortable feeling. So as clinicians, and especially in the assessment process, where individuals are coming to us as clinicians to evaluate their speech, their communication abilities, and you know how much is tied up, how much of us and our competence and the perceptions by others of our competence, how much is tied up by our ability to express ourselves. Well, knowing that, you really have you're as a speech language clinician, in an extremely powerful position with reference to your client, to either shame them or make them feel less than whole, or to support them, even if they're coming with a problem and looking for your assessment, identification of the problem, analysis of the problem, treatment of the problem. Still, competence is critical. Relationship-based assessment is aimed at understanding the inner life of the individual that you're interacting with, supporting a sense of competence even when that individual is being assessed, and a problem might be identified. Keep in mind, and I think we may have raised this in the dynamic assessment conversation that we had last time, that I always think that in terms of children, there are three major contexts that influence language performance. School, for adults, I would have put vocational here. Caregiver, with adults, it's the caregiver is, instead of partially caregiver, but it's significant other. And peer, that is friend to friend. School, caregiver, peer. Vocational context, significant other, peer, friend. Those are three distinct social contexts that influence language performance, and that we really require or challenge others in which, again, these are relationship-based contexts. That's my point, relationship-based contexts. And that the projection of competence, the need for others to attend to one's intentionality, goals, ideation, consciousness, awareness, and affect are central. So to summarize, the primary functions of language are to express intentionality. Content of mind and affect demand that assessment be relationship-based. Next, we'll discuss paradigms that reveal what constitutes language. These paradigms are a major major source of information that helps guide assessment.